Hey guys, welcome back to my Animal Adventures YouTube channel, and in this episode I want to talk to you about the information that I track for my snakes. And when I first started out, I tracked a whole bunch of information, and now over the years I've pretty much whittled it down to just a little bit of information that I track. And whether you have one ball python, just a couple, or hundreds, there's some information that you should be tracking, and I'm going to cover that in this episode. Okay, so at the very beginning, when I started in ball pythons, I actually ramped up pretty quick. I had about 15 or 20 snakes, and I put them in a rack system, and I started recording everything in a spreadsheet, and I put that spreadsheet in a 3-ring binder, and I tracked everything, all the sheds, when they went to the bathroom, and the rodents that they ate, and all the weight gains and everything, and I had everything all tracked. And I found it was interesting information, but it didn't really help me. And in the long term, I just had really a 3-ring binder full of information. And I kind of went from a long-term bookkeeping type of tracking to really a short-term system. And let me show you that short-term system. So we should start with the type of rack system I have, which is really handy. My racks are made by ARS Caging, and all the racks are metal. And the thing that I use are these magnetic, it comes in a roll. It's a magnetic roll, and I actually cut different sections out of it with the scissors. And then I just take a label maker, a 1/2-inch label maker, and I put little labels on it. And it's really handy. I can just move stuff around, and I label everything. Everything's pretty much short term. So what I do is typically when I'm feeding once a week, usually just during the feeding, if someone's in shed, what I'll do is I'll put an in-shed sticker right on the tub, and that means that they need extra humidity. And what I do is I kind of go through the rack, and I know instantly which ones need the extra humidity to make it through the shed. So I'll take my little water can, and I'll go through and I'll pull some tubs maybe a couple times a week and make sure that those snakes have extra humidity. And it makes it really simple. And as soon as they're through the shed, I pull the little sticker off, and it's done. I don't track it, I don't record it, and it's the only purpose that I have for tracking the shed is to help them through to add the extra humidity. And I find for long-term bookkeeping, it doesn't really help me to know if snakes are going through a shed. And the other thing I do is for the shed, if they get stuck in a shed, I'll put it upside down like this. Then I know this one I need to come back like every day or two and just kind of spray down the snake, or maybe if I have some extra time, I'll take that snake out, put it in a tub, and really soak it. And other than that, I don't really track the sheds at all. It's just kind of a short term. I can look at my racks, I know exactly what's going on, and it's really fast and simple. So the feeding, I kind of do similar to the shedding. I don't track it long term, and really, it doesn't really help me if I know if a certain snake has eaten every single week for the past 6 months. The only time I really think about it is when I come up to the breeding season. In the breeding season, what I do is I look at body condition. It doesn't really matter how many rodents they've eaten. If I can look at a snake and it's over 1,500 grams for a female, and I know it's ready to breed, and it has a really nice body condition, it doesn't really matter if it's been off food for a couple weeks. If it still has that body condition, it's ready to breed. And other than that, I don't really track anything as far as long-term tracking on the food. But I do track the snakes that are off feed, and it kind of gives me an idea of how many rodents I need to prepare for a feeding. For example, now we're going into the breeding season, and you'll notice a lot of my females off feed, off feed, off feed, off feed, off feed. So I know that a lot of these are all going off feed because I'm breeding them, and since they're going off feed, I have to prepare far less rats to feed my females because they're going off of feed. And I can just kind of go through my rack, and I can kind of just look at, here's one off feed that I know that I don't have to worry about preparing a rat. I actually attempt to feed those, and typically what I'll do is I'll feed those first just to give them a chance to feed. And obviously if they don't feed, then I'll move on to the next one. And most of the ones off feed, won't take the rat. And actually, if they do feed, what I'll do is I'll take the off feed, and then if they do take a rat, then they're on feed. And sometimes it'll go on and off and on and off every other week or once a month, and I'll just kind of move it back and forth. And then the other thing I do, so I actually just fed, and you can tell here, I actually, when I feed, I'll put a clip on the left if they don't eat, and then I'll put a clip on the right. So this one ate, and you can see it's it's on feed, and this one's off feed, it didn't eat. This one's on feed, it just ate 2 rats, and I'm trying to boost up my albinos because they're kind of picky eaters. And then what I do before the next feeding is I'll take all these off, and then I'll make sure, I can tell this one's on feed, off feed, and then I know just from the clips, this one is 8-2, it's on feed, and then I don't need the clips until I feed next time. And then the next time I feed, I'll put the clips on there and then make sure all the clips match the off feed, or if there's no off feed, they're actually eating a rat. And then just from a glance, I know exactly what's going on with my rack. Okay, so there's another bit of information that I do track, and I've actually had family members say, you know, if something happens to you, what am I going to do with all your snakes? And for example, if I was in the hospital, permanently disabled, or forbid, I was, you know, taken out by a bus or something, and someone had to come in after me and deal with all these snakes, what I really want is someone to know exactly which snake is in which tub. And what I do is I clearly label everything. So if you come up to a tub, you know this is an albino het-pied female. It was born in 2015. And I actually started tracking the weights on here, and I was going to update the weights, and I really haven't updated them. What I'm probably going to do is just cut the weights off. The weights, to me, it doesn't really matter, and I don't really track it. That's one of the things that has kind of lingered from my initial labeling of all my tubs, and I don't really track the weights at all on my tubs. So when it comes to my hatchlings, I do my hatchlings a little bit different because hatchlings really need a little bit more attention, especially when they're just out of the egg and they're eating their first meals. So for example, I have 1 rack of hatchlings left here, and what I'll do is I'll feed my hatchlings until they ate 6 rodents. And then after they eat 6 rodents, they're pretty much good to go for life. The very first rodents that they eat, I found really needs to be mouse crawlers, live mouse crawlers. And it's just when they have a little bit of fuzz on them, they're just crawling around. Pretty much right when they open their eyes is about the perfect size, right before their hopper size. And you can see some of these down on the bottom. When they're assist fed, I'll put a little assist fed sign on there to let me know, hey, I need to assist feed this. And this one has only actually had 5 rodents. It's the very last hatchling that hasn't had 6 rodents yet. And these are some of the really skinniest, tiniest hatchlings that came out of my albino pied mix. And that's pretty much what I do for my rodents, and I label them all exactly with what they are. And it's real easy for the shows because, you know, I just label the display cases exactly what this label says, and it's really easy to take care of and really easy to track. So I actually have one more piece of information that I track for these snakes, and that is if they are mousers. And some of these ball pythons, they refuse to eat rats. They will only eat mice. And what I do on those, for example, I have a couple mousers right here. I have a mouser, and sometimes I can trick them into eating a rat. Actually, my jungle one with spider down here is a mouser. And you can see right here, and I actually tried to feed him a rat on my feeding video. It was one of the only ones that didn't take a rat, and actually tried to feed him a rat the other day, and this girl actually grabbed the rat and wrapped it and left it there and didn't eat it. She's really picky, and sometimes I'll take a rat and I'll kind of wipe it on some mice and get the scent of the mouse. And see, this girl is in shed. So what I do is the first time, if I open a tub and they're in shed, I'll take one of these in shed stickers and I'll put it on here. And now I know she needs some extra humidity to get her through the shed. But these mousers, since they're on mice, they grow really slow. And it takes a lot of mice to really get them up to size it's in order to breed them. So actually there is some essential information that you want to track in a spreadsheet or other kind of computer program, or at least on paper, and that is the pairing of your snakes and the babies that come out of each pair. And you really want to track it, because if something unusual comes out, you definitely want to track it back to the parents. As a matter of fact, a lot of people at the shows, they'll pick up a snake and they'll say, well, what was the pairing for this hatchling? And if you have it easily accessible, you can say, oh yeah, that was my bamboo crossed with my pinstripe. You know, you have it right there, easily accessible. And what I do is I actually put it on the labels for each hatchling. So for every hatchling, I have a detailed label of exactly what that snake is. And this one is, I have a code here that's 18C1M. And the 18 is from 2018, the first clutch, and it's a male. So this is my very first clutch of ball python hatchlings from last year. So this is like my biggest snakes from clutch 1, and these are fantastic. I love these coral glows. I'm definitely pairing up my coral glow again, and these are 50% het pied. I'm almost tempted to keep some of these back. These are wonderful, beautiful snakes, really amazing. But you definitely want to track everything in a spreadsheet as far as your hatchlings. And I would say out of all the information that I track, that's the number one thing that you really need to pay attention to. And other than that, I don't really track anything in a spreadsheet. So there's really one final thing that I kind of keep track of, and that is my change in the bedding. And the bedding, I typically change it once a month, and pretty much just in the first of the month, I automatically change it. But really, it really comes down to, you know, every week or so, every few days, I go through and I kind of take my little sprinkling can and I add humidity to all the tubs. And if it smells bad, I would say it's time to change the substrate. And it's usually, if it smells bad, it's past a month. And typically it depends on the size of your snakes. So for these smaller snakes like this, I would say they keep the bedding a lot cleaner than some of your bigger snakes. And all these little ones here, I would say this one's a beauty here. My lesser bamboo, she is gorgeous. Beautiful white snake. And a small snake like this, in this fairly big tub, they don't really make as much mess as a bigger snake. So if you're looking at some of these big ones like this big snake here, this one's definitely going to make a lot more mess than a small one. As a matter of fact, if you look at some of these real big ones over here, these really big monster snakes, these will make quite the mess. And the other thing you really have to think about is, especially with the substrate change, is in the ball python breeding season, now that all these females are off food, you have to realize that if they're not eating food, they're not going to the bathroom, and they're not shedding. Well, they will pee because they're drinking water, but as far as really making a big mess in their tub, they won't really make a big mess. So the substrate typically lasts a lot longer. But the other thing you have to realize is not all my females are breeding. I gave some the year off because they laid really late in the season. So typically I go through, and it doesn't really matter if they're cleaner or not as clean. I'll go through and just change them all at the beginning of the month, and then I kind of know in my mind that they're all kind of on the same schedule. Okay, so that wraps up my discussion of how I keep track of all the info for my snakes. And let me tell you, if you adopt a system similar to this, it's really easy. You can just look at your racks and you pretty much know instantly what's going on, what kind of maintenance needs to be done, and how to take care of it. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.